Well, good morning, everyone. And as Mike Hittner would say, hello out there in television land. Mike's unable to be with us, so I'm taking his place. And my name is Jim Nickel. And to my right, I have Larry Knutson. And this is his first time on the show, so welcome, Larry.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, too.
I find this very interesting.
Well, it's a little different being on this side of the camera versus being on the other side of the camera or sitting in front of the television just watching it and saying, wow, that looks pretty good.
Right. It's a good opportunity for Point Bass.
Yes, it
members.
is. The studio does a great job of promoting our all of our events and everything, and for letting us do all these taping and everything. So we just got done with the Pioneer Fest. From all indications, it was very well received by everyone. We had a lot of visitors. I thought we did anyway. And what was your take on the show?
Well, unlike last year, we had wonderful weather for the whole event. Last year was Sunday was a little bad weather there for us, so we had a lot of people participate this year. All our members were there to do their interpretation of the different sites and all the exhibits that we do at Point Bass. Unlike a lot of other historical sites, we have people there interpreting the site and what is done back in the 1840s to 1860s. And I think all the people that were there certainly loved the homemade ice cream that we have out there. And all the goodies that the ladies in the house prepared out there, and I think it was just a wonderful event this year.
Yeah. Now you were in the cabin, weren't you? No, you were in the bunkhouse. Yes.
We had the bunkhouse last year. We dedicated the bunkhouse. It was just built by the members out there, so it's a very period building. We have to make sure that everything is as it was in the 1840s to 1860s in the construction of the bunkhouse. And like I say, it was dedicated last year, and we were kind of, well, what are we going to have in the bunkhouse? We weren't sure, because a bunkhouse is a bunkhouse. It's not super exciting per se. It's where people would have stayed that worked on the Wakely property and or people that were coming up, heading to the lumber camps, because coming up to the Wakely site was as far up as you could get with a keelboat. So a lot of the people that came up the river by keelboat had to get off there, and then they would go from there up to the lumber camps for their work and stuff.
And they need a little place to stay.
They wanted a little place to stay and get out of the elements and things like that. I think we have just a little bit of work to do on the bunkhouse yet, fine tune things out there. But when I was in the bunkhouse, I portray myself as a Norwegian immigrant that has come up here to work in the lumber camps and also to do hunting. And one of the things we don't talk a lot about, and I like to talk about it because it was part of life back then, was hunting the passenger pigeon and waterfowl.
There was a lot of passenger pigeons back in that day.
There was a tremendous amount.
They say that when they flew that they would block out the sun and just make it kind of dark out because there were so many of the passenger pigeons at that time.
Right. And a lot of people back at that time did not like the passenger pigeon because they devastated crops.
Right.
When they came up, flew up, and things like that. So they were not liked. But it's one interesting thing about Point Bass. It kind of puts you back in that period, if you will.
Right.
And it allows you to think about what it was actually like back in that time. And as far as the passenger pigeon, if you can imagine seeing all these billions of pigeons blocking out the sun for 2 to 3 hours, you would think, we could shoot all these and we're never going to get rid of them.
Yeah.
But as we know today, of course, that's not true. So, but again, historic Point Bass kind of puts you back in that time frame and it, to me at least, allows you to kind of feel what it was like.
I noticed when you moved into the bunkhouse, one of the first things you did is you put on a door closer.
Right, yeah, the door, that's one of the little items we have to do to fine tune the bunkhouse yet. We don't have a lock, or not a lock, but
A little latch.
a latch on the door in there, and it was at our maple syrup fest that I was in the bunkhouse. It was the first time I had set things up, and it was a very windy day, and it kept blowing the door open. So I had to kind of rig up a door closure, which was basically a rock on a piece of rope, to pull the door shut. And I guess I've got good feedback from our people at Point Bass, and so we're going to leave it there.
The visitors liked it too, because one woman, she accidentally was looking at it and she moved it and the rock fell off, and she felt really bad, and she picked it up and everything, and she put it back on there and she said, maybe we need a bigger rock.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, it was Pioneer Fest was really good. A lot of people showed up, and I think it was just a great event.
Yeah, and I think, like I say, it's more of a hands-on event than a lot of historic sites around the country. You guys in the three-bay shed out there doing the woodworking, they actually use the tools of the period. We don't use modern tools necessarily on a lot of things that we make out there. They actually use some of the tools of the period out there.
Right. This year was the first time at this event. This was the first time that we brought down the molding planes, and we let the people try using the molding planes. And a lot of people thought it was interesting, because I would demonstrate it, and it works really easy. But if you're not used to it, they would get a hold of it, and the molding plane doesn't move at all. There's a nice, light, delicate touch that you have to have on there to get it to go and come out nice and smooth. And eventually, they were able to get a nice little bead on the edge of a board. And they thought that was rather interesting, because we had just come back from a historical place over the weekend, Diane and I, and it was one of these things where they pulled out the chimneys in the buildings when we leave our chimneys in there, so we fire up our stoves and everything, and they don't use a lot of their equipment and stuff, and so the only thing that they have going is the blacksmith shop, where we have everything is open, and people are just welcome to pick up things, look at them, ask questions. That hands-on thing is really, really nice. People really get interested in that then.
And when I say you get a feel for it, is like at the Pioneer Fest, the ladies in the house are cooking on the wood stove. They're actually using it, and they're making things, and so you can get little tidbits from them, little treats to taste and stuff like that. But you also get a feel of how warm it can be in that house with that wood stove going.
Especially during the summer.
Yeah, but if you look at the kitchen area, there are multiple windows. The two main doors are in there, so that house was built to take into consideration ventilation.
Right.
In there, so in the summertime when you are cooking, because they use that stove 24/7, they needed that ventilation in the kitchen.
Yeah, they catch that little breeze off the river, and it would flow right through the house.
Right.
Bugs, I don't know, the bugs just get the chance to go in and out too, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do a great job in the house, and Diane was cooking up last time, and you get a lot of good stuff, food comes out of that kitchen.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So. But other than that, coming up, I think we have the Whodunit. Have you been a portrayer at the Whodunit?
I was last year, and I had kind of a negative persona last time, so I was kind of hoping for a nicer one this time.
You get a better one this time, huh? Well,
but sadly, I won't be there this time.
Oh,
I got competing.
So this year they probably would have gave you a good guy.
Yeah, I would have, maybe
good character. But yeah, this year, so you folks, our Whodunit is coming up. It's on July 28th, and it runs from 2 to 5. The cost is $2 for students, $5 for adults. And like I say, we start at 2 o'clock, and you come out, you'll get a pamphlet. You'll be able to go around to the different buildings and where the different characters are, and ask questions. And this year we know that it's after the 4th of July. And the festivities for the 4th of July went off without a hitch until they find a dead man. And they find him after they fire off their celebratory cannon, you know. And not only was he killed, but they don't even know who he is. So our visitors will have a chance to be able to try and solve the crime, and plus maybe they can even figure out who the dead man is. You know, that might be kind of a nice help. And now you were a character, and you know, you had people coming around, and they would always try to trip you up to see if you could clue you in on who is the person that did you know, the crime. But we don't know who it is. You know, we don't ourselves.
The portrayers out there are correct. We don't have the answer, so we have to kind of do our best to follow along. We have some information, but it's very light information that we have. And some of the people that come ask some very interesting questions at times. Like you say, trying to trip you up or trying to figure out, and we don't always have that information either.
Right. It always gives us a chance to, you know, think about new answers from questions that people ask us.
Mm-hmm.
And we also at the same time are trying to guess who is the killer or the robber,
Right.
or whoever it is, you know.
A lot of people that come out there, I know I've talked to them, talked to some last year, and they've been coming out there year after year after year because they really love the event, you know, and it's kind of a mystery theater, if you will. Yeah, they really get into it themselves.
Right, yeah, because we have the pamphlet, and the pamphlet tells who all the different characters are, and then it's up to the visitors then to help solve this crime, you know. I mean,
Right.
that's their job. They're kind of like the private detectives of today, you know.
Right.
So this is a chance for visitors out there that would like to come, that want to try and perfect their investigative skills, you know, to see if they can really figure out who it is. And some years nobody guesses it, and some years we get a lot of people get it right, you know. I think last year there was a couple people that had guessed it right. I didn't, but
Yeah, nor did I.
yeah, it's a rather interesting thing, you know. And the visitors are welcome to come out. You know, you go around and ask all the characters, and then you can go back and revisit some of the characters that you missed, because you may come up with some new questions, you know, that you want to ask and everything.
And it gives you an opportunity to see the site.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you come out there, it's one of the most beautiful sites in Wisconsin as far as location and everything else on the Wisconsin River. So even if you come out and you don't guess who it is, if you will, at least it allows you to see the site. And I think we get a lot of return people for our other events once they see the
Right.
whodunit. And the whodunit is a shorter event, if you will, you know, for compared to our Pioneer Fest. Or Pioneer Fest
Right,
is
those
2
usually
days.
start in the morning.
The whodunit is a shorter event, so
Right.
but it still gives you that opportunity to
And
see the site.
We had some feedback from last year on it. It was a very hot day last year.
Yeah.
And so this year we're going to have soda and water available for sale. So for visitors coming out, they won't have to stop and go someplace to get something to drink and then have to come back. We'll have some beverages right on the grounds for them.
Yeah.
So that'll make it a lot easier for them.
I think Point Bass, and I'm a newer member myself, but I think Point Bass has been going for like 30 some years.
I think it's close to 35 years.
And we're still learning.
Yeah, we're still learning yet.
So
We welcome the feedback from visitors, because
Yeah.
we take that into account. I mean, it helps us, you know, because this is something that they would like to see or have, you know, or have done, you know. So that does help the organization improve and get better every year and
Oh,
at every
for sure.
event, you know.
Yeah.
So then after our the whodunit, our next event coming up is the Harvest Fair. That's just a one-day Harvest Fair thing. We have quite a few vendors come in for that one, and they'll set up their wares, and people will be able to go around. I believe we do some. We have a gentleman that comes out there and makes sauerkraut.
We certainly hope they'll come back.
Because that's the sauerkraut.
It's basically a whole family. I do not remember last year, but the year before, there's a whole family that comes out there and they make sauerkraut, and it's really something to watch how they make it, because they pound it, or they shred it, they pound it, they put it in the crock, they pound it in the crock and things like that, and I found it very interesting that Grandpa is there. And they have some of the younger people pounding in the crock, and if the younger people hit that crock with that pounder, Grandpa kind of, no, he can't hit that crock.
He keeps a good close eye on that thing, Yeah.
So again, something super interesting.
And that's the sauerkraut that we used then at our Wakely feast in February.
Yeah.
So it's started right there, and then it's fermented over time, and then we get a chance then to use that
and
back at Wakely Feast.
We harvest apples right off the Wakely site that we make apple cider with. Last year, the ladies in the house made some wonderful apple butter, which is awesome, and so we still make ice cream at that time. And we had some apple butter on the ice cream, which was awesome.
Yeah, they did. Well, the kids enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And they enjoy turning that crank, making that ice cream and everything.
Sure.
And they love grinding up the ice to make the ice cream.
Well, and we had some wonderful young girls last year volunteered to turn the crank on the apple cider grinder to grind the apples and things like that, which helped me a lot because I was doing the grinding and I'm old. So
it's kind of nice to be able to take a break during the daytime
Right,
where you don't have
yeah.
to sit there constantly grind. And then they got a chance to go and once the apples were ground up, to be able to see how it comes out of the press, because they got a chance to get a hold of the bar and churn that down and press it down, and then they got a chance to see it, and then they got a chance to taste it and everything.
But the taste too,
So-
it's a totally different taste, so.
So yeah, it's and all of the buildings are always open then on that day. So and we harvested our ice back in January, and we used some of that ice at the Pioneer Fest to make the ice
Right.
cream. And when we make our ice cream again here at Harvest Fair in September, we'll still have ice left in our ice house. And so we use that ice yet again. So it's interesting that even though we have a small ice house, we still have ice available for us up until September yet, Because when we bought the blocks out of the for Pioneer Fest, the blocks were almost the same size as they were when we put them in.
Yeah.
So,
We'll see this year with the weather the way it is. It's gonna
Well, with
it may
this
be
hot-
a little iffy, but it is amazing how that sawdust that we have over the ice can keep that ice as long as it does. And at Point Bass, nothing goes to waste, because when the ice is gone that we use to make the ice cream and stuff, the sawdust we take out and we put on our trails at Point Bass. So even that is used out there.
right, so when they're walking around on the trails and they see the sawdust, that they know that it came from our ice house.
From the ice house,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Yeah, we shovel it all out of there to get the blocks out. Some of it we put back in, to save for the next event. But, and then whatever's left over, then we put on the trails. And then down near the end of the year, we clean out any ice, if there's any left in there late in the year, and then we spread all that sawdust out on there. So
Right.
it's a nice, use for the sawdust. It gets double use on it. It's kind of, we repurpose it, so it's been cut
Right,
into
because-
boards, and we get the sawdust, and we use it twice over again,
As back in the 1840s to 1860s, they didn't waste anything.
They did not
so-
waste anything. They
Yeah.
used everything that they could.
Right.
So then, after the harvest fair, we're going to be having a cooking class this year. And this year, we're calling it a camp out cooking. In the past, we've run it 4 weeks. It was every first Tuesday, I believe, of every week in September, and it ran in the evening. And no one has 4 weeks in a row where you can make it, you know. And then on the 5th week was our graduation type ceremony where the students then had a chance to come out and do all the cooking and everything. And this year, we're going to have it all in one day. We're going to have it on September 22nd, and we're going to start at 9 o'clock. And this is on a Saturday, so we're going to start at 9 o'clock in the morning and run probably till 5 o'clock, maybe a little bit later. So we'll be going through all the different styles of the cooking that were available back at that time. So we'll be doing we'll try and do a hard-boiled egg in clay. We'll do egg on a rock. We'll cook some bacon on a rock, I believe. They do some fish on a plank where they put the fish onto a cedar board and get it up by the fire so that the heat coming off there cooks the fish. We'll be doing some cast iron cooking. We'll be doing, Dave will be back out there, I believe, and he'll do his meat, potatoes, kind of like a venison stew ingredients. And he does that in the ground, where he digs his hole, puts his leaves and his rocks in there and all the food and covers it up with a tarp. And the rocks, he's got the ashes in the bottom of it, and he covers that all up, puts dirt over the top of it, and comes back later in the day, and all the meat is just nice and tender. It just falls right off apart and everything. Then we'll have some cast iron cooking, and then when that's all said and done, the students will get a chance to do some cooking too, and I believe we'll be in the house, so they'll be able to get a chance to see what it's like to cook on that stove too, you know, and not only be able to taste the food, but get to prepare it on that stove and feel how hot it is.
That's what I was going to say. Unlike a lot of other events that I've been to and stuff, this one you actually get to taste what you make. So you get a little bit. Now, my guess is, because this is the first time we're only doing it in one day, but by the time you get a tidbit of this and a tidbit of that, by the end of the day, you're probably going to be kind of full, you know, with tasting a little bit of everything. But,
right, because Dave does cook up quite a bit of venison and potatoes and carrots, you know,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
onions and everything, and then you got all the desserts. I mean, I know one year they made I think it was a cherry or it was a pineapple upside down cake in a cast iron pot, you know, and he had it up bubbling away and everything. At the end of the time, flipped it over and took off the pot, and on the lid there was that beautiful upside down cake, and it looked really good and it tasted good
Yeah.
too.
And I think anybody that cooks outside knows that anything cooked outside, that smoke, even though let's say the eggs or whatever are done on a stone, cooked on a stone or something, you still get that smoky flavor because the smoke comes up and comes
Curls
around
right
the
over
top, and so yeah, it's totally different flavor than what you would get in.
Yeah, so, and this is a good chance for people that do some camping, you know, but really don't do outdoor cooking very much. So these are things that when they come and learn, when they go camping, they'll be able to use these skills.
Yeah. Well, and as an example, the use of cast iron, it can be scary if you've never done it before. But if your cast iron is seasoned properly, you'll find it's better than any modern cookware you can use out there. And that's part of what they talk about, is how to season your cast iron properly and things like that as well. So it kind of takes the fear out of cooking, or actually increases the interest in trying some of these different things.
Right, because on your cast iron pan, you know, once it's well seasoned and everything, it's as good, if not better, than the Teflon coated pans.
Oh, for sure.
You know,
My cast iron at home, I can put an egg in there and it can float around.
it just
on there.
slides right around
Yeah,
there.
Yeah, yeah.
And food I've noticed that food cooked on a cast iron pan or a pot tastes completely different and much better than it does off of a regular old frying pan on a stove, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a much better taste. And so that class is, it's only gonna say it's all day long, but
And I think one reason for that is cast iron, you do have to put some butter in there or some oil in there to do it.
Yeah.
Where Teflon, that you don't need butter or something, and you lose flavor if you don't have butter in there.
well, this is true, yeah. Back then, I think they used a lot of lard.
Lard too. Lard
Yeah,
is,
a lot
I
of
tell
lard
you,
and
lard
everything.
is wonderful stuff.
So if someone out there is interested in joining up and signing up for this class, there's a, go to our website, and under the calendar of events, you can click on the cookout class, and there's a number that you can call, or you can send an email even to, there's a place to send an email to, and I think it's info@historicpointbass.com, and Point Bass is B-A-S-S-E. It's not like a bass, it's a boss, so.
I kind of wanted to bring that out today. A lot of people, why the weird spelling or whatever, you know. And as if you go on our website, it'll explain it on there. Historic Point Bass is Point Bass in French, means low point.
Right.
And so it's not bass like the fish, you know, you're not fishing for bass or anything. It's bass is Point Bass is low point in the Wisconsin River, where the Indians had crossed the river for generations after generations, you know. And so that's why the spelling is the way it is.
And if you
And
look
the
at
pronunciation.
and if you look at some of the old maps, I mean, they have the B-A-S-S-E, but they also have it as a B-A-S. I've seen a couple maps like they had it like that. So even back then, they had some issues with how to spell it and call it
sure,
and everything,
sure,
you know. But
sure.
most on almost everything I've seen, it's always B-A-S-S-E. So
E, yeah, right.
yep. So the cooking class, it's the charge is $15, and that just to cover the cost of the materials, you know, because we have to purchase all the food, and so we have chicken and whatever else they're going to have out there. So it's kind of a moderate price, I would think, you know, to learn how to cook on this and everything. And then we also like to have the people have 15 hours of volunteer time for our organization, and most of the time, the people that attend the cooking class end up becoming members because they enjoy the experience, they enjoy the atmosphere out there, and all the friendship that's out there, and it's just a great day to be out there cooking and learning all kinds of new skills. And we even do boiling water with rocks.
And where can you go nowadays, get a full day's entertainment for $15? I don't know.
Plus a meal. You get to eat
Plus-
at the
plus a
same
meal,
time, and you
right.
get to eat at the same time. So check out the website for how to sign up for it, and hopefully that we'll be able to see you come out there and get some new faces out there at our cooking class. So then, after our cooking class coming up yet then is we have an encampment. Well, the encampment is a little bit different than what is normally done out there. The buildings aren't open on this one, but they have an encampment, so it's more like a rendezvous type thing, isn't it?
Yeah, the encampment is a wonderful site. There are people there that are camping that are a little earlier time period than Historic Point Bass. They're more probably early 1800s or 1700s, you know, in
A
that
little late
era.
1700s.
Late 17, early 1800s in that era there. The cabin is typically open. Last year they turned the cabin into a tavern. So, you know, it wasn't a trapper's cabin, but it was a tavern they turned it into, so, which made it kind of unique too.
Give it a
looked
different flair.
nice. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
But we do have some participants there that aren't at our other events because it's an earlier time period. But if explaining Historic Point Boss too, we do have the Wakely site, which is the main site, and that includes the larger number of buildings. But outside of that site is the cabin. The cabin is actually more of a, let's say, an early 1800 era, and our interpreter in there is dressed in an earlier period. But we have that, there's like a row of trees there between the Wakely site and the cabin.
Kind of sets it apart.
Just to kind of set it apart just a little bit, so you know that's a little bit earlier era. Then on the other side of the river, or excuse me, the creek, that the bridge that we have, there's a schoolhouse. And that is even a different time period than the Wakely. So we've expanded the site. We have the Wakely site, which is 1840 to 1860, but we've expanded that so there's even more for you to see out there.
Right, the schoolhouse, because the schoolhouse does go up into the 20s, 1920s.
Correct.
Even though the schoolhouse was actually built back in the 1840s and then moved to our site, And we do get some visitors that used to go to that school, and they look at it and,
Correct.
reminisce on the old days,
Yeah,
when they were
yeah.
kids going to the school. So.
Well, I went to a run-room schoolhouse when I was a kid, so I said there's a lot of remembrances there, and unlike today, they're fond memories. So
Yeah. So then, later on, after the encampment is free too. So now the
Yes.
encampment is on October 13th and 14th, and that on the 13th it runs from 9 to 4. Then on Sunday it goes from 9 to 2. And like I say, that event is free, and the campers just enjoy having people coming out there. They have an area there where they have games of that time period, how they camped and everything, and how they cooked. They didn't carry around a cast iron stove, so they got a little small stove maybe, but most of it is outdoor fire cooking. So
they have people doing a lot of cooking, giving demonstrations. More than willing to talk about their stuff that they have, and some of this stuff, I think we'll talk about that a little bit later, is some unusual things that you won't find today, and some things you will find today that are used back then that are still used today.
Still popular yet today.
A lot of things. There's one gentleman out there, I'm hoping he's there every year at the encampment. His portrayal is a surveyor. And if you think back in that era, what it must have been like to be a surveyor, to survey the whole United States. It's beyond comprehension what they were facing, I think.
And their maps are fairly accurate
Very,
too.
very accurate, very accurate.
They did a very, very good job.
Yeah.
So then, the next thing that would be after that would be Spirit Walk, and that we run on two different days. We run them on it'll be on October 20th and October 27th, and it runs from 6 o'clock till about 8:30, maybe a little bit later. It depends on how many people are still out on the course, and that's $2 for students and $5 for adults. And our Spirit Walk it's right around the Halloween time, but it's not a spooky, scary kind of thing, and it's more of a historical story about how they lived or possibly even died, back in that time, period. Have you ever been on the?
My first year as a volunteer at Historic Point Bass, I was a spirit. I totally enjoyed it. I was a Norwegian immigrant that passed away in a logging accident and things. So, but yeah, a lot of the spirits that we have are, like you say, it's not a scary thing, if you will, but it takes place at night.
Yeah.
And we have guides that follow, that
Carrying their little
guide you along
candle
our paths.
lanterns.
Right,
Yeah.
candle lanterns.
Get to carry a
So
candle lantern.
it's so we have people to watch out for you, our guides, to make sure that you don't get lost or anything out there. Excuse me. But I think our Spirit Walk probably has more return people. There are people that return for the Spirit Walk year after year after year. So it's not an event necessarily that you go to once and you say, oh, I was there once, I don't think I'll go back. We have a tremendous amount of people that come back every year.
Right, because
to see the difference.
Right.
Because we have different spirits every
different
year.
spirits every year. Yes, there's different spirits every year. So it's kind of interesting, to see who the spirits are going to be for that next year, and everything.
And we step out of portrayal just a little bit on some because even though, like myself, I portrayed as a Norwegian immigrant, that died in a lumbering accident. Excuse me. You step out of period just a little bit. We had 2 young gals last year that were witches, and they had their cauldron, and they put on a fantastic presentation.
They have a great storyline, and you can hear them cackling all over the whole grounds and everything. So it's kind of a neat sound and everything.
The kids that come that may be a little bit bored with us talking, when they get to them, they love it.
The kids just love that and everything, and like you say, it's not scary, so the kids are having a good time as they're going around with their parents and everything. So that's kind of neat and everything. And one of the other things is that you do is we've seen you at the home show, and you have set up a little table, and you have it a what is it table, and exactly what is a what is it table?
What is it table is something I came up with. That we have a lot of things, and like you say, at Historic Point Boss, we're more than happy to talk about our stuff that we have out there, and a lot of people, a lot of things that we use at Historic Point Boss, some of the woodworking things and stuff like that, we still use today. But I have a lot of things that are unique to the time period, if you will. And just for some examples, I brought some along today that I've had on my What Is It table. I try and come up with new things every year, but I've done it 2 years now, and I'm kind of running out of things. So I'm relying, this year you brought me an item that I didn't know what it was. So it's a learning experience for me as well.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because as Diane and I go around, and we try to find things that we don't have out at our site, that we can pick up and bring back, and then it's something new, so that you get a chance to put it on your table and have the people guess.
Right.
So what have you brought here?
So it's a learning experience for me as well on some of that. So, okay, some of the items I brought today. I portray a Norwegian immigrant, and I come here and I do hunting during the summer. Winter I'm doing logging and stuff, but during the summer I do a lot of hunting and things like that to make extra money. So in my bunkhouse also, I have a lot of these items out there, and they're items that I would, what I brought today are items that I would take along with me on a hunt out there. And on a hunt, one of the most important things, because you have to remember back in the time, you're out there in the wilderness by yourself, okay? Yep. Some of the hunts you may be with other people, but some of the groups, they had a large number of people, but a lot of times you're all by yourself in the wilderness. So if you're in the wilderness, one thing that's probably the most important thing in the wilderness is fire. And so in your hunting kit and your possibles pouch or your hunting bags, you would want to keep something to make fire with. And one of the things, of course, that you would have for those nice sunny days is you would have what was called a burning glass back then. And a burning glass is what we today is a magnifying glass, And I think a lot of people when they were younger have used magnifying glasses and things like that to start fire with. And it works wonderful on a nice sunny day. To get an ember on the items that I'll show you here shortly, on a nice day to get a nice red ember going would take about 5 to 7 seconds.
Right, it does go very quick.
Real
quick. It goes really quick.
But on those not so nice days, or foggy days, or not so clear, I would carry flint and steel with me. And flint and steel, I would carry probably at least 2. Excuse me, in case I lost one, I would always have a backup. Excuse me.
little sip of tea there.
Yeah, yeah. That's what they call it. Yeah. Using the flint and steel, you need to catch an ember. And to catch an ember, one thing I would use is char cloth. This is made the same way that charcoal is made, making wood, but you use cloth, and it has to be a natural material, cotton or linen. And you put your excuse me, char cloth on your flint, and you strike it with your striker, and you'll get a little red ember on there, and you blow on it, and then you put that in your tinder. Tinder I like using is just old rope, old manila rope or hemp rope, and you shred it up, and it gives you a nice nest in there. If you're hunting, you can use mouse nest. Is wonderful
nest,
tinder,
yeah.
you know. Bird's nests. There's a lot of different things you can use out there. Just grass, you know, make your tinder. If I run out of char cloth, another item I may have, I've got slow match or match cord. This was originated from the old matchlock rifles.
Oh, okay, right.
They would use this to shoot off the rifle, okay? When the matchlock rifles went out of favor, they still used it. They used it to light cannons, you know, not for the fuse, but to light the fuse and things like that. But it's also match cord from the matchlock rifle or slow match because it burns very, very, very slow. And all it is cotton cord soaked in potassium nitrate. And the way I make mine, the easiest way to get potassium nitrate is black powder.
Right.
You just put black powder in water, you soak it in, let it dry, and you got your match cord. This piece right here, I could easily get 30 to 40 lights out of this one piece here because it burns so slow in there.
So at least you don't have to carry around a whole lot of it.
You don't
as
really.
You're out there for
right.
Your days on end.
And I didn't bring it today. Another thing that you can use out there is it's called char punk. Okay, it's made charcoal or like char cloth. You make it the same as char cloth or charcoal, but you use punky wood. Punky wood is wood that's partially decayed. It's real squishy, and you make that the same way as your char cloth. You put it in an enclosed container and you put it on the fire, so it's made without oxygen. And as long as you can find that punky wood out there, you could stay out in the woods indefinitely because you can find that all over the woods.
And there was a mushroom too that grew on the side of a tree.
There's two mushrooms. There's chaga and amadou. Both grow on birch trees, and you find those and correct those. Excuse me. You don't really have to do anything with.
Right, yeah. We have some amadou, I believe. We have an amadou growing on an apple tree. So it's...
Excuse me.
Maybe somewhere along the line we might have to take off a little chunk and give it to you so that you can give it a try.
Yeah.
So...
I'm sure they grow on other trees. I'm not up to date on that, but I know they do grow on birch trees.
Yeah, they're very,
right, yeah.
very prominent on birch trees.
Right. Another item as a hunter I may carry in my hunting pouch is a horn like this. And if you notice, there's wax on the end of it. If I didn't have wax, I may use an oiled cloth or oiled leather on the end of it. And on the inside of this, I've got some rope, some old rope in there. And I would keep a piece of char cloth or match cord or something like that in there. And I would keep this in my hunting pouch so that if I fell in the water and I came out of the water, I needed to start a fire to dry off and warm up, you know. I could take this out of my hunting pouch, take my knife, take the wax off of here, pull out my tinder and my char cloth out of here. I can make my fire, and then I can seal it back up and put it back in my pouch in case I'm dumb enough to fall in the water again.
See, and we're always used to seeing a horn like that when you watch the movies, you know, that's where they carried all their powder, you know.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I've got a horn for I have a double barrel shotgun from that era. percussion cap, and I've got my powder horn for that. So horns were used for a multitude of things.
They didn't waste it. They used everything there.
They used it. You can use it for a drinking vessel. You can use it for a spoon, whatever. But this is kind of like an emergency kit, so that you're always able to make fire.
Right, that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Just stay warm and chance to heat up your food.
Another thing that I've got what I call America's first glue. As a hunter, I would carry it in my hunting pouch like this, or in a clamshell like this. And what this is pine sap and charcoal.
Okay.
And it's the same thing that the Indians used to make birch bark canoes.
That's how they sealed them off.
That's how they sealed the birch bark on the canoe so it didn't leak. Now, just the pine sap and charcoal is very brittle. Well, on a canoe, you don't want brittle, you need flexible. So what they would do is they would add animal fat to this, and that makes it flexible for the birch bark canoe.
Mm-hmm.
And as a hunter, I carry small quantities. The voyageurs that came over in the 1700s and stuff, and the Indians, they would carry buckets of this stuff, just so that they could patch their canoes and things like that, But if you heat this up on the fire, it melts.
Okay.
And then you can glue whatever, and then it just let it harden, and it goes back to this state, which is, again, very brittle. If you want it not pliable, but if you want it more durable, less brittle, and more durable, you put plant fiber in. You grind up plant fiber, and you can put plant fiber in here, which makes it more durable as well. In other words, it'll last longer.
Last a lot longer then. Yeah.
Another thing, if I'm going on a hunt, but I want a little variety, is I would carry a fishing kit with me, so that if I was lucky enough to camp by a stream or something, I could maybe catch fish for a little variety in my diet. In my little fishing kit I've got here, I've got my little weights here. I'd make them of lead or pewter, depending what I had. These are made out of pewter here. My fishing line typically would have been like linen or cotton, linen being a better material. It doesn't decay as much as cotton in the water. And like this, I would wax the line, because that even makes it more durable. Excuse me. And of course, I'd have my bobbers. This one I made out of a corn cob. Corn cob being one of the most versatile pieces of natural material you've got out there.
Yeah, it floats very nice.
I've got other line here, Of course, then I've got a cork bobber as well. In my fishing kit, in mine, you're not going to be able to see this, probably, but it looks like the modern day monofilament line.
Yes, it does.
Okay. What it is silkworm gut. And from the silkworm, when you open a silkworm up, it has two guts in there, and then inside the gut there is a piece of silkworm gut that's about 18 inches long, something like that. And they take that and they tie that together, and that makes a fish leader.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
like you say, if you look at it, it looks just like monofilament today. But it's more brittle when it's dry. So you have to soak it. In order to tie it, you have to soak it to so you can tie your knots and things like that.
And then it's always in the water, so it's always going to be soft.
If it's in the water.
It'll be
Now,
soft.
this is for smaller fish. It'd be like for panfish or trout. It's only about a 3-pound test.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not real strong. I would tie that. I may use my linen fishing line and put that out to make what they call a trout line. It's a long line out, and then you got these leaders off of that, to try and fish.
They didn't have a DNR back then, so
No, you could
use
kinda do what you
multiple
want.
hooks.
Yeah. This silkworm gut, amazingly, was you could get this back in the 1700s, and you can still get it today. So it's been in use. So it's actually my understanding. No, I'm not positive on this. My understanding is a lot of the purest fly fishermen today prefer silkworm gut over the monofilament that you have today. So if you see a avid fly fisherman, ask him, see if that's
See if
true or
he's
not.
using good
Yeah,
things here.
right, yeah. Another thing, then, of course, what you need are hooks.
I was going to ask you about your hooks, Don. Do you make your own hooks?
Yeah, well, these that I've got here, I've got a little bit of both. I've got hooks I made, and I've got hooks I bought, but I had to modify the end on them because in the 1840s, 1860s, and so on, and even before that, they did not have eyes on their hooks. They're called a spade end, and it's just a flattened end on the hook. So what you had to do is you take your line and you tie a knot. It's called a Schnell knot, and the Schnell knot is still used today.
Still used today,
Okay,
yes
yeah.
it is.
And you tie that on your spade end of your hook, and it is as secure, if not even more secure, than tying to an eye of a hook if it's done properly. So, so the hooks that they would have had back then would be the spade end hook.
Okay.
So
Well, those are some really
that's
interesting
my
items.
fishing kit,
Yeah.
if you will.
And I know you've got a lot more that you have and everything, so. So our next event, like I say, is going to be our Who Done It, and we hope to see a lot of our viewers out there this year for the Who Done It, and hopefully they'll be able to figure out just exactly who did kill the gentleman, and how, maybe even, because we know that the cannon they got fires blanks, so the cannon couldn't have killed him. So other than that,
Yeah.
is there anything else that we
Well,
need to
like I say, I've when my wife and I, when we go on trips and things like that, wherever we go, we typically try and take in a historic site someplace, around the country. And so we've been to a lot of historic sites, and a lot of them are amazing sites. I think Historic Point Boss ranks right up there with the majority of them. And the thing with Historic Point Boss is everybody that works there, the interpreters, the workers, we have a work crew every Monday.
Yep.
Everybody is volunteers. We do not have any professionals there working on a continuing basis. We try and bring professionals in. Last year, that was a Pioneer Fest. We had a gentleman that came in to demonstrate the looms upstairs. He was on the looms. Now this gentleman has YouTube videos out there on how to use looms, so and when he came in and he got on our loom, he was very impressed with our loom that we had up there.
Right, because he's an interpreter out at Heritage Hills, and they have looms there of that time period, but he doesn't get to use them. So he was really excited that he was able to sit down and spend the day sitting at a loom
And
making a rug, that
Again, hands-on.
and he got a hands-on thing, and people would come and he would tell about it and everything else. And our visitors are welcome to sit down at the loom and give it a try, So, so hopefully we'll be able to see the visitors out there for the Who Done It. That's coming up July 28th from 2 to 5. $2 for students, $5 for adults, and we'll have some beverages on the grounds in case it's a very hot day. And so, thank you, Larry, for coming. And
Thank you.
all right, and thanks for watching.